Welcome to today's episode of Unthinkable, a podcast about the aftermath of incidents causing catastrophic injury or death, the experts who are called to serve when these accidents occur, and lessons that we can all learn and implement in our own personal lives. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, kylebachus.com. Now here's the host of the Unthinkable podcast, Kyle Bachus.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Unthinkable podcast. We have a great guest with us today. I'll introduce her in just a minute. This is a podcast, as I'm sure many of you know and have listened to. We deal with catastrophic injury and death, and we deal with all aspects of it. From the investigation standpoint to the experts who come to testify at trial to jury consultants and what happens when we get to trial on cases and everything in between. And so we appreciate you being here today. Today I have Aly Schmidt. Now, Aly Schmidt is a lobbyist. Okay, she is the co-owner of a prestigious lobbying firm here in Colorado. She is a lobbyist. They do work with multiple companies, but they also work with the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association. And I'm just so pleased to have you here today, especially Aly. I know the legislative cycle just ended and legislation has been passed, and this is your hopefully your vacation time. And here you are with us today. So I really appreciate you taking time, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kyle. It's so good to be here. It's truly a millennial's dream to be a guest on a podcast, so I appreciate it.
Well, we couldn't be happier to have you. I do want to, those who listen and watch this podcast know that I like to get some background into understanding, like, okay, here's what you do for a living. And is this something that you dreamed about when you were a little girl? You were going to bed at night and you said, you know what I'm going to do? When I grow up, I'm going to be a lobbyist. Is that what happened?
Not quite. I probably didn't know what a lobbyist was when I was a little girl. I grew up in a small town in Colorado called Severance and was always interested in politics. My family was interested in politics, certainly had a lot of interest in my government and social study classes in school. And I went to CSU for my bachelor's degree and got an internship my senior year. And the internship was basically working for a legislator at the state capitol. And we would go down 2 days a week to help the legislator with whatever they needed. And I just fell in love with the whole place. I loved the process. I loved the policymaking. Frankly, I loved the drama and the crazy stuff that happens there. And so I was very lucky and networked during my internship and got a job right out of college being a lobbyist.
Well, I'll tell you, that is a very cool job to have in college, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of people, the closest that they ever get to the legislative process is maybe they do a field trip in eighth grade, or maybe some states they go to Washington, D.C. in fifth grade. And they see these big buildings and they might have some rudimentary understanding of what's happening in there, but they don't get the kind of exposure that you got in college. That's really cool.
I think that's right. Democracy is really best learned in it. And there's only so much you can learn from a textbook, right? I knew the process of how a bill becomes a law and the basic understanding of how our system works, but to really be in it and watching it is the only way to really learn about it.
Yeah, and if you're in my age demographic, we used to have on Saturday morning when the cartoons came on, there was a thing called I'm just a bill. Have you ever seen it?
Love it. Yeah, Schoolhouse Rock. So
Schoolhouse
good.
Rock. That's right. That's what it is. So that's how I first learned about the legislative processes. I think in between Bugs Bunny. Or something like that. So
totally.
I think that in terms of what we do here and talking about catastrophic injury and death, I think some people might be surprised on when they first think about it, how does a lobbyist participate in that process? But it's actually hugely fundamental, and that is that, yes, you can win a case in the courthouse, right? We, as lawyers, I can take a catastrophic injury case and we can fight that case out in the courtroom. But before you ever get to the courtroom, it's the laws that apply to the event itself that have a larger impact than what can ultimately happen in a courtroom, because without the right to bring a claim, or without the protections that exist with the Seventh Amendment to the United States Constitution through the legislative process, there is no courthouse to go to.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the laws, while sometimes are nitty gritty, and I think people would find kind of boring, are so important to our daily lives and how we can move around in this world, particularly in the example that you bring up when something catastrophic happens.
Yeah, and you think about the way that the way that the legal system is set up. Every case that walks into a lawyer's office is impacted by what laws have been passed down at the state capitol.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's my job as a lobbyist, particularly when I'm representing the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association, as you mentioned, to make sure that those laws are the best they can be for your clients. And when people come to you as a lawyer, when something horrible happens to them, it's my job to make sure that the laws give you all the tools you need to be an excellent lawyer in the courtroom and get those people what they need. Yeah,
and so let's get into the day in the life of a lobbyist. I think other than lawyers and used car salesmen, people say, well, lobbyists kind of comes with a taint in some ways. I've certainly been called an ambulance chaser, and I say, yeah, I mean, until you need my help, you may have one view, and when you need my help, you may have a different view, right? There's no, as I've said on this podcast before, there's no Future Accident Victims of America coalition, right?
Yes.
The closest to that is the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association, or a similar organization that's fighting for the rights of individuals. But there's this what's a lobbyist? Can you tell us what a day in the life of a lobbyist is? Why do we need lobbyists?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you mentioned at the top of the show, I co-own a lobbying firm here in Colorado. We represent a bunch of different companies and foundations and nonprofits. And our job is to work with all three branches of government. So the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate, the executive branch, which is the governor and his team, and even occasionally the judicial branch, which is the court system. You do most of your work there. And our job is to really educate those people about the issues that who we're representing are facing. And so when a bill comes forward through the legislative process, we evaluate the bill with you and other Colorado Trial Lawyers Association members through the lens of what is best for your clients. And then we act accordingly. So we pass bills through the legislative process. There are many times we have to change or amend bills that are written poorly or need to be rewritten. And then even occasionally we do have to kill bills that we believe would be really bad for your clients.
And so when you talk about the members of the legislature that you are educating, this, I know it's a silly question, but just to frame it, like, why do they need to be educated? Can't they just read it themselves? And haven't they been elected to read the bills and to make educated decisions based upon their knowledge and experience?
That is such an excellent question. And in our state, we have a citizen legislature, which means that almost all of our legislators, there are 100 of them, 65 in the House and 35 in the Senate. They all have other jobs, and they may have expertise in certain areas Most of them are not attorneys, which I think is surprising for people to hear. So it's not like they're super in the weeds on our statutes and understand our laws like you do. In addition to that, the legislature considers almost 700 bills between January and May. And so for a lawmaker, one individual lawmaker, to really read through all of those, evaluate them, and understand them is not really possible. And so it's my job to be their resource, particularly on issues in civil law, so that they can have a better understanding of what the bill does or doesn't do and make their decision accordingly.
Yeah, man. I mean, context and perspective really matters. If you think about how long is the legislative cycle in Colorado?
It's 120 days, January to May.
Okay. So you have 120 days, and let's say you are a non-lawyer and you've been elected effectively to work a part-time job serving in your state's legislature, and you have 700 bills that need to be considered in a 120-day period of time.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. And they, it's not, they're human. They can't do it. And so we have to help them understand what those bills do.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And so different organizations have different takes, right? Different perspectives on what might be a good law or a bad law based upon their particular constituency. And so they're trying to have the opportunity to meet with the people who are going to cast the votes, and they're meeting with those people to try to make sure, hey, are you sure? Take a close look at this particular one of 700, or take a look at this and see what the impact is actually going to be. Look at the fine print, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I will add that at the Capitol, most of the interests are business oriented. And so particularly for trial lawyers, and to your point earlier, we always say we can't have a coalition of the pre-injured. And so we have to make sure that we have a seat at the table so that we can make sure that lawmakers understand your client's perspective to make the laws better for them.
Right. And so, boy, that it makes it sound like that's kind of an uphill battle if really the people and organizations that can most afford to be heard are, let's say, big business or money interests or insurance companies. Sounds kind of like a David versus Goliath, right? Where there's a lot that you have to try to work through to be effective.
Yes, it definitely feels like that. And I think the other dynamic here is that the legislature generally is not for change. And so particularly when we're running legislation to try and change the law or create new law, it's extra difficult because the status quo is better for most of the lobby. And so we have to go up against all those folks in order to get our policies passed.
And so when an idea comes up for a new law, can you just explain what is the actual process down at the legislature for somebody who decides, hey, I think there should be a law that says X, and just so we can give some context to when a lobbyist would come into play?
Yeah. So what we would do as a lobbying firm for the people that we represent, we would talk to them first about the issue, really try and get educated ourselves so that we can understand the issue and we feel like we can persuade our audience, which is likely the legislature, to do what we need them to do. We would then work with legislators to find bill sponsors You have to have legislators sponsor your piece of legislation in order to introduce it. After we have bill sponsors, then there's a legal office within the state capitol that will write the legislation. And we usually send them, a Word doc of what we think it should be. And then there's some back and forth as we edit the new law on bill paper.
So let me ask this question about the sponsor. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
So I understand this. So I get the idea that somebody who's been elected has to sponsor a new potential law, but does every person who gets elected, do they have like a certain number of bills that they can sponsor? Is it unlimited? Is it, how does that work? How do they get the ability to be a sponsor?
Yeah, so each legislator gets at least 5 bills. After that, you have to get bills approved by leadership, but leadership often approves many bills, which is why we get 600 to 700 per session. But yes, each lawmaker gets at least 5 bills every session.
Now, is it common that each lawmaker would use their inventory, their full 5, or do some write no new bills, or do they feel like compelled, like, hey man, I'm elected, I got 5 opportunities, got 5 tokens to write new laws, I'm going to use every single one of those every single cycle?
I think for most legislators, they use all 5 plus. There are many legislators who will sponsor 20, 30 bills during one session. There are few who may not use all 5, but that's pretty unique. They all want to run 5 bills.
Okay, so somebody comes up with a potential law. Let's say they go hire a lobbyist to help make that happen. The lobbying firm can help locate sponsors who still have some of their 5 allocated that are left, or they have the ability to go to leadership and try to ask for additional sponsorship opportunities.
That's right. And there's some strategy involved, right? Because sometimes for a bill, you want bipartisan lawmakers to show the Democrats and the Republicans, this is a good idea that we all agree on. Sometimes it's a geographic thing. You need a legislator from the Western Slope because of the issue you're working on. Or sometimes you want an attorney on the bill because it's so complicated that you need someone who's going to be able to explain to their colleagues what the bill does.
Okay, so you're strategizing, who should we try to get to sponsor this? There can be then more than one sponsor, it sounds like. Is there a limit on how many sponsors you can have?
So each bill can have up to 2 prime sponsors in each chamber. And then you can have as many co-sponsors as you want after that. And the prime sponsors are the ones who present the bill, who debate the bill. They're really in charge of the bill.
And so of the 700 bills that are introduced in a cycle, let's say, how many of those actually get signed by the governor and become law?
Yeah. So in our state constitution, we have something called gavel, which means that every single bill introduced has to have a hearing and a vote. So that's different than Congress, right? Because in Congress, the chair of a committee can just not hear a bill and then it's dead. And in our state legislature, the leadership the power is much more diffuse. And so everyone gets 5 bills. Each of those bills has to have a hearing and a vote, which basically makes them all live wires. And so because of that constitutional amendment, a large majority of our bills pass. It's much harder to kill bills here than at the federal level, for example.
So in an average Colorado legislative cycle, are like 500 new laws being passed each cycle? Is that, I'm just making up a number.
We've seen up to 70 to 80% of bills introduced will pass.
Wow. And so if you're a sponsor of a bill, being a sponsor gives you some street cred. Like if you get, hey, this particular legislator has been able to, getting 100% of the laws that they propose passed. Is that something, or am I just making up that idea?
I mean, it's certainly, people notice that. It makes you an effective lawmaker. It probably makes people want to work with you moving forward. It's a demonstration that you can work with your colleagues and get stuff done in a sometimes very hostile environment, which lobbyists, lawmakers, interest groups, they all notice.
Okay, and so let's go back to our process. You kind of left off in explaining you've found strategically located a sponsor. You've kind of worked with the sponsor and whomever it is that is kind of wanting to promulgate the legislation, and you put together like a Word document. You sent it over to the legislative drafters. What happens next?
So once we get the bill drafted in a good place where everyone agrees, then the bill is introduced. And once the bill is introduced, it's assigned to a committee. And committee is really where the work happens in democracy. As you know, a committee is a subgroup of the chamber. So like the House Judiciary Committee, and the bill will go to that committee in order to have a hearing. And during that hearing, anyone can come testify on the bill in support or in opposition, or maybe they want to talk about changes they want to the legislation. And then that subgroup of the legislature, the committee, which is made up of legislators, then debates the bill. They might make changes to the bill, and then they either pass the bill to another committee, or they pass the bill to the chamber, or occasionally they will kill a bill and then it's dead.
Okay, and you said anybody can come speak for or against the bill. Do you mean that? Like it's open to the public?
Yes, that's totally accurate. You can come in person and talk to the committee members, or since COVID, the legislature has Zoom options. And so you can even sign up online and you'll get a Zoom link from the legislative staff, and you can make your voice heard even from your own home.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, that really is bringing democracy all the way down to the individual citizen. If any citizen has the right to attend a hearing on a potential law and can actually speak to the committee, that's pretty incredible. I think that's really cool.
It's very important because the legislators want to hear from their constituents, and it's powerful when they hear from real people. They all know I'm a lobbyist and it's my job to talk to them about these issues. But when they get to hear from a real live person who's gone through something or needs this law changed for some reason, it's much more powerful and effective.
Wow, that's really cool. And who's making the decision as to what committee a particular bill is going to?
Yep. So it's leadership. So in the House, the Speaker of the House decides where the bill goes. And in the Senate, it's the president of the Senate. And they assign the bills to committee. And then the committee chairs decide when the bills will be heard, depending on their schedule.
Seems like a pretty powerful position, right?
For sure.
How do you become president of the Senate or Speaker of the House?
So though leadership is elected by their colleagues, and so for example, in the House, there are a majority of Democrats. And so the Democrats will elect their leader, which is the Speaker of the House, who's probably the most powerful position in the building, because the Speaker decides who sits on what committee and where the bills go, which committee the bills go to.
Wow, that does seem like a pretty concentrated source of power to have that power. And so, okay, so let's say you go through the hearing, maybe there's some modifications, amendments, I think, to the language in the proposed law. And there's then a vote of the committee, and the committee says, well, enough. Is it a majority vote or is it a super
majority vote? Correct.
Okay, majority vote. And so the committee will vote yes or no. And let's say the committee, just for sake of working through the process, committee says yes. We're going to agree that this bill should move forward to the Senate floor. Okay, let's, in our hypothetical, what happens next?
So now the bill is on the Senate floor for full debate, and that's called second reading. And during second reading, all 35 members of the Senate are in the chamber, and they're debating, it's loud, they might be arguing, they might be trying to offer amendments. And after the debate is done, which can take 30 seconds or can take 12 hours, depending on the issue.
Wow.
There's no time limit. Then there is a voice vote. So there's no recorded vote. And the chair of the committee at the time, chair of the floor debate, will decide whether the bill passes or fails based on the voice vote.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to talk about there. So just to be clear, let's say that there's a voice vote and the leader of the debate decides, hey, I think that's a no. That's a no. I feel like that's a no. What happens then?
So that's pretty rare because the majority party is always in the chair. And so they get to decide. If they decide there's a no, they can it's called a division, which is a procedural vote, to actually get a recorded vote and see if they can get it through. 99% of the time, the chair will call the bill as passed, and then it sits on the calendar for third reading, and third reading has to be the next day, and that is the recorded vote for that chamber.
All right. So, but if in the third reading, if the actual counted vote is a no, is that the end of the story for the bill, most likely?
Yes, most likely that's the end of the story.
Wow. So that's pretty big. So if you have a law that you're trying to work through and with a client, and you're trying to get this law passed, it sounds like you not only have to lobby to the committee, but now you've got the entire chamber. You need a majority of that chamber. Is it a simple majority?
It is a simple majority.
So you need a majority of that chamber to vote in favor of the law that you're trying to get passed. So
That's exactly right.
Are you then talking to all of these people, or you just try to strategically identify, hey, how do I get to like vote count? You're trying to get to a majority.
It's a little of both. We definitely do full floor counts where we count all 35 members in the Senate and all 65 members in the House. We also work with our bill sponsors. So if we know our bill sponsors have good relationships with certain members, we'll ask them to go lobby their own colleagues. But we have a written vote count sheet that we mark up with a pen, who's a yes, who's a no. And we have to get to 18 in the Senate and 33 in the House.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so you go through that process. Now let's say that it gets to the third reading as you described, and it's a positive. Yes, it passes in our hypothetical, it passes the Senate. Does it become a law then, or what's next?
So now it has to go to the other chamber or the House and start the process all over again. So it goes through the exact same process in the other chamber. And we have to see now how the House feels about the bill.
But up until, if it starts in the Senate, as we've described in this hypothetical, when it gets to the House has had, no committee has weighed in on the language in the bill. They've not had a vote. Is that right?
That's correct. So we have to start all over. We have to re-educate the committee. We have to help the bill sponsors. We have to get people to come testify, those real people that we were talking about a little bit earlier, because we have to redo the entire process once more.
And so what if it passes out of the Senate, it goes over to the House, it goes to a committee, and they want to make a change to one sentence? Can they change the words that were already agreed to in the other chamber? What happens then?
Yes, they can, and they like to, frankly. They all like to make their mark on their bills and make changes. If they make changes and the bill then passes the House, then the bill has to go back to the Senate to let the Senate evaluate the House changes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When it goes back to so just following through with this hypothetical, we passed a bill out of the Senate, it goes over to the House committee, or can you make changes on the floor or just in committee?
You can make changes on the floor too.
Okay. So somewhere along the process in the House, somebody makes a change to a sentence, and let's say it goes through to a third reading there and it passes, but now it's not the same bill that was word for word passed in the Senate. So now you got to go back to the Senate. Are you going back to a committee, or are you going back to the floor, or what? Where's it going?
In that case, you're just going back to the floor because the whole Senate has already evaluated the bill. You assume they know what's going on and they can review the change or changes from the House and then concur with amendments in most cases and then repass the bill.
Oh my goodness. And so, all right, well, so now you've gone through this entire process. What's the normal rate of accomplishing what we've just discussed to get to a point where you have a final piece of proposed legislation that is now passed both houses?
Yeah. So according to the rules, it technically only takes 3 days from introduction to final passage. That takes a lot of coordinating and a lot of people having it together. And so that is rare. Most bills take several weeks to even months to pass. There are bills that are introduced on the very first day of session and aren't done until the very last day. And I think that's because there's a lot of bills running through the system. And sometimes bills need a lot of work in order to get to a spot where everyone can be in a good place and vote yes.
And when you say bills need to get to, need a lot of work to get to a good place. So let's say that that somebody introduces early in the session, introduces a proposed law, and there's controversy, or there's other lobbyists who they're okay with 80% of a bill, but 20% of it is no good for their constituents. And maybe you have a particular group or coalition of legislators that feel the same way. Can you just talk about how I've heard it referred to as how they make the sausage down at the legislature?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's my job as the lobbyist to work with the other lobbyists and the legislators to get them to an okay place. And so we then negotiate changes and amendments to the bill. Like, for example, if a lobbyist comes to me and says, my client has issues with Section 5. Okay, let's talk about that. What are your issues with Section 5? And they say, we just need to strike Section 5. Well, we can't strike Section 5. Section 5 is important to the people that I'm representing. So are there changes we can make to Section 5 to get you more comfortable and to make sure that we're still achieving the goal that we set out to achieve? And hopefully you do that process before committee. And then the same person who drafted the bill, the legislative legal services, they will draft amendments to the bill. And then we have to review all those amendments, make sure everyone's in a good spot. Once that happens, then hopefully the sponsors of the bill in committee or on the floor will run those amendments to the bill and get that other lobbyist to a better place in their client.
So before you go to a committee to start this whole process, there must be some way that the general public or these other lobbyists are aware of this proposed new law to even start engaging in a conversation about, in your hypothetical, what are we going to do about Section 5?
Yeah, that's right. Once the bill is introduced, it's posted online publicly. It's on this General Assembly's website. And so anyone can go search through that website. They can see which bills were just introduced today, for example, and they can read those bills, look through them, and evaluate them from their own lens.
So when we talk about bringing democracy directly to the people. At the beginning or at any time during the legislative cycle, an individual, unelected, just regular Joe citizen can go to the website, look at the laws, identify who the sponsors are of the law, and if they wanted to go get a group of people in their community to then approach that particular lawmaker and say, hey, we don't like this, or we're against it. You need to take out this section, and effectively also could put pressure if they wanted to, right, on their lawmaker to make a change or to not move forward.
Yeah, I would say the Colorado legislature is very accessible. So you can find the laws that are or the bills that are being considered. You can find the fiscal notes, which means this is how the bill is going to impact the state's money if the bill requires funding. You can see which lawmakers are sponsoring which bills. You can see their email. You can get their office phone number so you can call them. You can see when committees are scheduled, what bills that committee will be hearing on which day and what time. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can sign up yourself to testify by coming in person or online.
Well, that's amazing. I don't think that very many people realize how accessible democracy is in Colorado to them. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it's a really an amazing thing to think about, that you could be unelected, just be a citizen of the state, have a position on a particular proposal, and sign up and go down, or like you said, sign up and log in from your home and participate in a Zoom where you're speaking with the sponsor of the bill and letting them know in a public setting what your position is. It's great.
That's exactly right. And it's so important because the laws that the state legislature passes are way closer to all of us in Colorado and impact us much more than, for example, what the federal government normally does. And so it's important that people in Colorado are able to have their voice heard.
And so let's move just back for a moment to our process hypothetical. And let's say that we started in the Senate and we were able to pass it and moved it over to the House, and they passed it but made a change. And so it then went back over to the Senate, and the Senate then agreed with the change. And now the bill has passed both chambers with identical language. Now, is it automatically a law? Is that the end of the story?
I wish, but we still have one more step. We have to, the bill has to be signed by the governor. And the governor, when he or she evaluates bills, can veto a bill, which means he's going to say, this bill is not going to become law. I completely disagree with it and it's terrible. He can sign the bill, or he can let the bill into law without signature. In most cases, the governor is either signing the bill or vetoing the bill. But as a lobbyist, I have to make sure throughout the process that I understand what the governor's position is on the bill. Our current governor, Jared Polis, who is term limited, we will get a new governor in November. Governor Polis was very involved in legislation. Not all governors are so hands-on. And so we always had to consider where the governor was at to make sure that if we were trying to push a policy change, that he was on our team and would sign it in the end.
Okay, wow. So I have a couple of questions. Number one, if the governor vetoes the new law, does it go away, or is there some way to override a veto?
So during the legislative session, if a bill goes down to the governor, he has 10 days to make a decision about it. If he vetoes it while the legislature is still in session, that bill gets sent back up to be reconsidered by the legislature. And to your point, they can then override that bill. An override takes 2/3 votes.
Wow.
So the stakes are a little bit higher when you're trying to override a veto. Most of the bills don't get sent to the governor until after session ends. And so then he has 30 days, we call it the 30-day clock, to make decisions about signing or vetoing. If he vetoes a bill in that 30-day clock, the legislature is out of session and the bill's dead.
Wow. So there's a lot of timing and strategy, but first of all, if you're a Democrat, you have a Democratic governor, and that governor vetoes legislation, and let's say the governor's not term limited, and you're going to have to deal with that governor again. There's some politics there, right? About whether you would even try to override a veto, because that might be viewed. I'm just making this up. I'm not saying Governor Polis would take it this way, but a governor hypothetically might view that as like being showed up, right? Of I'm the governor, we're in the same party, I vetoed this. Don't go show me up by trying to override my veto. I would think that might be something that happens.
You're exactly right. And it's my job to make sure I understand those relationships constantly. So I have to remember that if a legislator tried to override the governor's veto last year, those two probably don't get along very well. So I have to consider that in my strategy. But you're completely right that the lawmakers have to use their power effectively and efficiently. And the governor has to do the same thing. I've heard the governor say in meetings with him that he does consider how much power he has when he's vetoing a bill, specifically during session, because that's a big knock to your power if you get overridden by the legislature.
Right. And so so you bring up another point. There's kind of a strategy of what is the timing of landing a passed bill on the governor's desk, because sounds like there's two windows. If it's during the legislative cycle and there's 10 days or more left, then it can come back. But if it's later than that, and he's got 30 days and there's no coming back. And so that's something that you guys probably have to think about too.
That's exactly right. If we know that the governor is going to be, is not going to be on our team for a bill, we like to start that bill as early as possible, because it puts him in a position where he needs to negotiate. If he thinks the bill is going to come to him before session ends and we have the votes to override it, then he will come to the table to negotiate so we can all pass something that we agree on. If it's later than that, obviously his incentive is gone because he can veto the bill after we all go home.
So we talked about the lawmakers, not the governor in that sense, but the lawmakers, the members of the House and the Senate, having to wade through 700 new potential laws in this 120-day session. But now I'm hearing that the governor or somebody on behalf of the governor has to have their ear to the wall too, right? They have to be cognizant of what's happening over there. And like you said, they need to be weighing in if the governor's in a politically weak position, meaning that it seems like everybody likes it but him.
That's right. He has lots of staff that works for him, and they all have different expertise in certain policy areas. The governor and his staff are on the first floor of the Capitol, and the House and the Senate are on the second floor. And so you'll find during big bills, people running up and down the stairs, negotiating.
Literally running up and down the stairs.
Between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And his Governor Polis's staff does a very good job of negotiating and trying to come to agreement with folks.
And so I guess it depends on the governor that's in office, but is there kind of an open door if they want to hear about propose legislation at some point in the cycle. If it seems like it's going to get legs, they want to hear about it so that maybe they can put their touch on it before it even arrives, for a decision?
It's really a style question, to be honest. Some governors are much more hands-off on the legislative process, and they have staff that's keeping them in the loop about what's going on, but they are most likely to sign almost everything that comes forward. As I mentioned earlier, Governor Polis, since he came from Congress, is very interested in the legislative process and had a very hands-on approach. And he knew about every bill. He had positions and thoughts about every bill, and then would relay that to his staff, and they would go help relay his position to the legislature.
Well, also, if you're sitting and listening to this and you say, wow, I mean, the governor, that if you want to see where the true power of the governor lies, I mean, there's a ton, it seems like a ton of influence that the governor can have on what laws are passed during the entire time that they are elected, because they're making a decision on every single law, whether to veto it, whether to sign it, or whether to, I guess if you don't sign it, he knows it's going to become a law. So that's just kind of a silent protest. Is that what that is?
Yeah. And it's pretty rare, particularly for this governor.
Wow. And so, well, it's just amazing. And so at every step in the process, from the idea stage all the way through getting the governor's signature on a law, or maybe you're on the opposite side. You hear about an idea, you don't like the idea, your constituents don't like the idea, and so you're working the other side of it, which is to kill it.
Yes.
The lobbyists' work carries through that whole entire process.
That's exactly right. And we have had some issues where we wanted to kill bills, and we've lobbied the legislature through the entire process. A few years ago, a bill got to the governor, and we had to work really, really hard to get him to veto it. He ultimately did veto the bill, so that was exciting. But it's a ton of work and a ton of organizing to get the right people in front of the governor to convince him that the bill is a bad idea.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, honestly, sounds like a fascinating way to make a living. I mean, how cool that you're involved in the process, and you also get to see in a 120-day period or shortly thereafter, you get to see the fruits of your labor, good, bad, or ugly, right? You can, it's accountable, kind of like a sport. Not that it is, I guess there is a game or a sport in the sense that there's strategy involved all the way through, but you get to see the results of your work each cycle.
It's so true. It's the best job. I love the strategy behind it. I love learning new things. We learn about all kinds of new things all the time when people approach us and want help passing bills or killing bills. And so that's really exciting. And then, as you said, just being part of the whole process, particularly when you pass big legislation that you know is going to positively affect Coloradans, it's the best feeling in the whole wide world. It keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just to kind of put a point on it, you might ask yourself, if you're listening, like, how does this impact catastrophically injured people? Well, number one, with death cases, there's a wrongful death statute in Colorado. Every state has a statute. The only way you have any claim for wrongful death is pursuant to the statute, and it defines who can bring a claim, what can be recovered, under what circumstances, and how that money is split up. That's only because of the laws that are written down at the legislature. And we have caps on damages in our state, right? The legislature has decided what's the maximum amount that can be recovered in the event that somebody is killed or injured for different categories of losses, like pain or suffering. And I know that your organization, your firm, worked very hard on behalf of consumers with the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association to make sure that what was basically a bill that started in 1986, a $250,000 cap. So if your loved one was killed and you weren't receiving money from them financially, they weren't supporting you, their life was only worth $250,000 in 1986. Following that, to get the law changed to really increase that substantially to now $2,125,000. That only happens because somebody decided they were going to pass a law and you worked on it.
That's right. That one is so near and dear to my heart. Those laws were put in place before I was born, those caps. And in 2024, we were able to successfully negotiate with a lot of other interests, including the business community and the medical community, to get those caps up. We also, those caps, those numbers are now tied to inflation moving forward, which is really important. And I think that will substantially impact people's lives who are dealing with catastrophic situations or death, to your example, to be made somewhat whole again. And so, yeah, that one was very stressful and hard, but really worth it in the end.
Yeah, and I know we have to wrap up soon, but I want to just talk about one other example, right? Another example is, and a lot of people don't even realize this, if you get injured and you use your health insurance to pay for your medical expenses, there's fine print in your health insurance agreement, even though you paid premiums or you got it through an employer, maybe, regardless how you got it, there's fine print that says, hey, we'll pay for your medical bills through your health insurance, but if you ever make a claim against the person who caused you to incur those bills, you have to pay us back. And those clauses that are written by the insurance company that you don't even know about say they get paid back 100% first. That it doesn't matter whether there's any money left for you out of the at-fault driver's insurance policy or even your own auto insurance policy. You have to take all that money and pay them back. And so in Colorado, right, the legislature, through the lobbying efforts of your firm and through many other organizations as well, said, you know what, that's not fair that I'm paying a premium for my health insurance, but they're going to take all the money back and I might not get any settlement, even if I'm injured, even if I've lost $25,000 of wage loss. I don't get that because I have to pay them back. And so we have this make whole statute in Colorado that says, not so fast, not so fast. Health insurance, you only get reimbursed if there's enough money to first pay the injured party everything that they are owed on top of the medical bills that you pay. That is an incredibly beneficial law that would not exist without firms like yours, Aly.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And I think that law passed in 2010. So that's been impacting people for almost 20 years at this point, which is incredible, that people don't have to worry about that when something terrible happens.
Well, just a fascinating discussion. I'm so thankful, and I'm sure the audience is so thankful that you joined us today during what is supposed to be your vacation from having survived, yet another legislative cycle down at the State House. We really appreciate it. It's just been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Kyle. It was really great to be on, and I love my job, so it's very fun to chat about, and I really appreciate you asking me to be here.
Well, you have a great job, and I'm sure you've motivated some people to think about a career change themselves.
I love it. Reach out.
Okay. Thank you, Aly.
Thanks, Kyle.
You've been tuning into the Unthinkable podcast with your host, Kyle Bachus. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, kylebachus.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.